There are a lot of things we use each day without really knowing how they work. You might switch on your TV without knowing how it produces its image, or how those signals are sent or received. You might drive your car without knowing how it changes gas to movement. You might turn on your sink without really knowing how the water got there, clean enough to drink. The internet is one of those things that many people use without really understanding. I'd estimate most people understand less about how the internet works than any of the other things I mentioned above. You might have heard the terms server, router, modem, or any other jargon, but aren't really exactly sure what those things are or what they do. In this video, I hope to explain how the internet works at least well enough so that you can use those terms without causing my fellow tech services colleagues to cringe. In order to talk about the internet, we're going to have to start right off with this important distinction.
The internet is not something that you just dump something on. It's not a big truck. It's a series of tubes.
Well, it's not exactly a series of tubes either. It's a series of copper or fiber optic cables connecting a network of computers and digital devices, each with their own specific and special functions. This also means that the internet is not your browser. Google Chrome, Microsoft Edge, Apple's Safari, and Mozilla Firefox are browsers. And a browser is a type of application used for viewing specific types of files, web pages, that get transferred along the network of computers called the internet. So to summarize, you use a browser to view web pages on the internet. That means no matter what you do, it's never accurate to say that the internet doesn't work. You broke the internet, or the internet won't open. If that were true, you would have become the most powerful actor on the world economy, and developed nations would tremble in fear of your wrath. It'll always be more accurate to say you can't access the internet or your browser doesn't work. It might sound like a picky distinction, but think of it this way. If your car doesn't start, you don't say, "My engine broke." You say, "My car won't start." One of these things is a diagnosis, and the other is a symptom. And symptoms are easier to work from than diagnosis. So now that I have that off my chest, let's take a look at what happens when you open up a web page. First thing, you open up your browser. When your browser starts up, it automatically opens up a page called your home page. Now you can change which page your browser starts on in the settings menu, and if you ever notice that your browser is opening up to a page that you didn't expect, there is a possibility that an add-on or malware has been added to your browser or your computer that's changed this setting for you. If this has happened to you, you probably want to put in a trouble ticket as soon as you can. When your home page loads, your browser tells your computer to send a signal out to the internet, and then it receives and decodes a signal from the internet. This is a process that takes several steps and lots of equipment. So let's take a look at this process one step at a time. First, your browser has to make sense of a web address, or URL. URL stands for Uniform Resource Locator, and it's a very fitting name, as a URL's job is to allow the browser to locate a resource using a uniform standard. You might recognize a URL as looking something like this. Each part of that web address means something specific. The HTTP part tells the browser what the scheme being used is. Scheme translates from tech jargon as a method of talking with the web server, which is the machine where the file is stored. It also means a means of working with the information that the browser is going to receive from the server. In other words, it's kind of like having to tell the post office what kind of mail you're looking to send, as well as what kind of response you're looking to receive, so that they can be ready for it. In this case, we're going to be using the basic unsecured hypertext transfer protocol, which is shortened to HTTP. This was a protocol designed by Tim Berners-Lee and his team at CERN, with versions being released to the public in the early 90s. It became a de facto standard very quickly as a way to access and link to hypertext documents. By the way, hypertext refers to a type of document that links to other documents, and the concept of hypertext actually traces its way back to the early 1940s. Unfortunately, they simply had no effective means of actually creating the systems that they would need to make hypertext work at the time. Back to our URL, if the HTTP part is there to explain how to handle the address, then the part after those slashes is the address itself. Like an address, each part serves a different function. You can split www.google.com into 3 parts, each separated by the dot. These parts are ordered with the most important part to the right and least important stuff to the left. The right part, and the most important, is called the top-level domain, which is theoretically supposed to tell you either what kind of web page this is, commercial, government, education, and so on, or what country the website is based out of. In practice, that's really only held true for some of the top-level domains like .gov and .edu, and in some cases the top-level domain is split into 2 parts, such as .co.uk, which is used by sites based out of the United Kingdom. I'd guess that this is the way it is because Brits just really enjoy sticking out from the rest. Just to the left of the top-level domain, and second most important, is the second-level domain, which we usually just call the domain name because it's easier, and really, who wants to keep counting backwards all the time? Are you confused? Well, it's best not to think too hard about it. This is the first part of the URL that actually names a specific destination, in this case, Google. The parts before that are called subdomains, and they could be thought of as pieces of that domain. If a domain is the state, subdomains are the counties or school districts or water districts. This is where I'd like to point out that a lot of phishing sites try to fool you by putting the name of whatever site they're trying to impersonate in their subdomain. Always read domains from right to left. Don't be fooled by sites like www.google.totallylegit.ru. If you look at a URL that's longer, like this one, you'll see a slash after the domain. This is called the path, and it's a lot like following the directory tree on your local computer. If you aren't already comfortable with how directories work, you might be interested in watching my series on directories and File Explorer or macOS's Finder. Some websites will actually sneak a little bit of extra information into the URL. You can tell when this is happening because you'll see a question mark after the path portion of the URL. So that's the basics of a URL, and this might be a good time to take a breather and digest that information. In the next part, we're going to be taking a look at how typing in a URL and hitting enter actually ends up with you loading a web page.